The night Marcus Cole walked into the Harrington Gala, the room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way a room changes when someone enters who has earned every eye without asking for a single one. Chandeliers caught the light differently. Conversations softened mid-sentence. 300 of the most powerful people in the country turned, almost involuntarily, toward the entrance. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars. Jaw set, eyes calm, carrying particular stillness of a man who had survived things this room could not imagine. The applause started slowly. Then it swelled. He nodded once. Gracious but not warm. Controlled but not cold. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in the place where the noise of $3 billion never quite reached, he was thinking about a kitchen. A small kitchen. A stainless steel counter. The smell of something baking at 5 in the morning. And a woman who had no idea he was about to say her name in front of everyone in this room. Rewind. 16 years. Marcus Cole was 21 years old and had nothing. Not in the dramatic, romanticized way people describe starting from zero when they have already quietly secured a safety net. Actually nothing. His college fund was gone. Spent across 2.5 years of business degree he had abandoned in the second semester of his junior year when he realized he was learning theories about a world he didn't recognize and accumulating debt for a credential he no longer believed in. His father had not taken it well. The conversation had been short, precise, and final in the way only conversations with men like Marcus Sr. could be. There was no shouting. There rarely was. Just a particular coldness of a man withdrawing not his love. Marcus was never entirely sure that it had been there to withdraw, but his patience, his investment, his belief that his son was going to turn out the way he had planned. Marcus had packed a bag that weekend and moved into a room in a shared house 2 miles from the university he had just left. He had $400, a laptop, and the kind of quiet fury that either destroys a person or becomes the engine of everything they build. For 3 months, he did nothing useful with it. He applied for jobs that didn't call back. He started 2 business ideas that dissolved within weeks. He ate badly and slept irregularly and spent too many hours staring at spreadsheets that represented futures he couldn't figure out how to reach from where he was standing. He was not lazy. That was never the problem. He was lost, which is a different thing entirely, and in some ways harder, because laziness at least knows what it is. It was his roommate, a quietly practical young woman named Sasha, who pointed him toward Dorothy's catering. "They're hiring," she said one morning, sliding a printed flyer across the kitchen table without ceremony. "It's early hours, physical work, probably not what you pictured, but it's real money and she actually pays on time." Marcus looked at the flyer. Dorothy's Catering and Events. EST 2001. Reliable. Honest. Built from scratch. He called that afternoon. Dorothy answered on the second ring. Her voice was direct and warm in equal measure. The voice of someone who had no time to waste and no interest in wasting yours either. "Can you lift 40 pounds? She asked. "Yes," he said. "Can you be somewhere at 4:30 in the morning without being reminded?" "Yes," he said. "Can you follow instructions the first time without needing them explained twice?" A pause. "I'm working on that one," he said honestly. A brief silence on her end. Then, "Come in tomorrow. 4:30. Don't be late." She hired him before he even walked through the door. If you have ever been given a chance by someone who had no reason to give it, this story is for you. Subscribe to Echotales right now and hit the bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop one word in the comments below. Just one word. That describes a person who gave you a chance when you needed it most. I read every single comment. Now let's go back to that kitchen. Because what happened between Marcus Cole and Dorothy Mensah over the next 4 years, and what Marcus did 16 years later on stage in front of 300 people, is a story about the kind of belief that changes the entire direction of a life. It starts at 4:30 in the morning, in a kitchen that smelled like possibility. Dorothy's operation ran out of commercial kitchen space in a building she had leased for 11 years. Clean, organized, relentlessly efficient, every surface exactly where it needed to be and nothing anywhere it didn't. She catered corporate events, private dinners, community functions, and the occasional wedding for clients who had found her through word of mouth and stayed because she delivered without drama every single time. She had 3 part-time staff and had been running on understaffed for 6 months before Marcus arrived. He showed up at 4:28 on his first morning in a clean shirt and worn boots, and Dorothy, already at the stainless steel counter with 2 pans going, looked up and said, "2 minutes early. Good start. Wash your hands and get over here." Marcus washed his hands and got over there. She put him on prep work first, chopping, measuring, loading delivery trays, the kind of work that requires no skill but considerable attention. She watched him from the corner of her eye without appearing to watch him. She noticed that he was meticulous. She noticed that he asked one clarifying question at the beginning of each task and then executed without further interruption. She noticed that when he made a mistake, misread a quantity on the prep sheet, had to redo a tray, he corrected it without complaint and without the particular self-flagellation that slows people down more than the mistake itself. By 7 a.m. on his first day, she had quietly recalibrated her assessment of him. By the end of his first week, she had given him a key. Marcus noticed everything about the way Dorothy ran her business. He couldn't help it. The part of him that had spent 2.5 years in business school, the part that had always been drawn to how things were built and why they held, was constantly running a quiet analysis underneath the physical work. Her margins were tight but deliberate. Her client relationships were built entirely on reliability. She underpromised and overdelivered so consistently that her repeat booking rate was extraordinary. She had no marketing budget and needed none. She had turned down 3 offers to expand into a second location because she understood, with the clarity of someone who had built something real, that growth without infrastructure is just a faster way to lose what you have. Marcus watched all of this and said nothing about it. He just showed up. 4:30. Every morning he was scheduled, sometimes earlier. It was Dorothy who broke the professional distance first. Not inappropriately, not suddenly. The way she did everything, gradually, deliberately, because she had decided it was the right thing, and she didn't do things halfway once she had decided. It started with questions, not personal questions, professional ones. She began asking Marcus's opinion on things. A new menu configuration, a delivery route, a client proposal she was drafting, not because she needed his input to make a decision, because she was paying attention to the way his mind worked, and she wanted to see what it would do with room to move. His answers were good, better than good. He had a natural instinct for systems, for seeing where the friction was in a process and identifying the simplest correction. He thought in structures and sequences the way some people think in images or words. Dorothy listened to his answers without excessive praise. She asked follow-up questions. She pushed back when she disagreed and told him exactly why. She implemented 3 of his suggestions in the first month and told him directly which ones she had used and what the outcome had been. Marcus had never been managed like that before. He had had teachers who praised everything equally, which taught him nothing. He had had a father whose feedback was either silence or correction, which taught him only to avoid being visible. He had never had someone who engaged with his actual thinking, took it seriously enough to push against it, valued it enough to act on it, respected him enough to tell him the truth about what worked and what didn't. It was disorienting, in the best possible way. One evening after a long catering event, a corporate dinner for 200 that had run 40 minutes over schedule due to a venue issue entirely outside their control. Marcus was loading the last of the equipment into the van when Dorothy came and leaned against the side of the vehicle beside him. They were both tired in the specific way of people who had been moving fast and precisely for 12 straight hours. "You handled the Reeves table situation well tonight," she said. He had noticed a guest with severe allergy had been seated near a dish that contained a hidden ingredient not listed on the menu card. He had caught it, quietly rerouted the dish, arranged an alternative, and ensured the guest never knew there had been an issue. "It needed handling," he said simply. "Most people would have panicked or passed it up," she said. "You just solved it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "I used to pass things up. Didn't do me much good." Dorothy looked at him. "What changed?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. "Someone stopped accepting that from me," he said. Dorothy said nothing, but the look she gave him was the particular look of someone filing something important away. They drove back in companionable silence. Marcus stared out the passenger window at the city moving past and thought about what he had just said. thought about the fact that it was true, that Dorothy, without ever making a speech about it, without ever sitting him down and telling him what she expected, had simply, by the quality of her own standard, raised the floor of what he accepted from himself. He had never had that before. He wasn't entirely sure what to do with it, but he knew, with the quiet certainty of someone recognizing something real, that he did not want to lose access to it. Marcus stayed, not just because the job was stable or the pay was fair. He stayed because the kitchen on those early mornings, with the pans going and the prep sheets clipped to the board and Dorothy moving through her work with the focused grace of someone who had decided exactly who she was and acted accordingly, that kitchen was the clearest thinking he did all day. He started bringing a notebook, small, spiral-bound, tucked in his back pocket. He wrote things down, not Dorothy's recipes or operational details, nothing that belonged to her, but observations, frameworks he was developing, business ideas that were beginning to organize themselves into something more coherent than the half-formed impulses that had failed him before. Dorothy noticed the notebook. She said nothing about it for 3 weeks. Then one morning she set a coffee down next to him while he was writing between tasks and said, "What are you building?" Marcus looked up. "I'm not sure yet," he said honestly. "Something in real estate development. I keep seeing the same gaps in the market, and I think I know how to address them, but I haven't found the right entry point." Dorothy sat down across from him at the prep counter. The first time she had sat during work hours in the months he had been there. "Tell me," she said. He told her. She listened for 20 minutes without interrupting. Then she asked 7 questions. Precise, structural questions that went directly to the weaknesses in his thinking, not to dismantle it, but to show him where it needed reinforcement. By the time they finished, Marcus had filled 4 pages of the notebook. Dorothy stood up, straightened her apron, and went back to the stove. "Same gap I saw when I started this business," she said over her shoulder. "Everyone sees the opportunity. Almost nobody does the structural work first. That's where most people lose." Marcus looked at his notebook. "Is that what you did?" he asked. "The structural work first?" "Still doing it," she said simply, "every single day." He wrote that down too. Marcus worked for Dorothy for 4 years. In that time, he learned things that no curriculum had taught him and no amount of theoretical study would have surfaced. He learned that the difference between a business that survives and one that doesn't is almost never the idea. It is the operator's relationship with detail, with consistency, with the unglamorous daily discipline of doing the right thing even when no one is measuring it. He learned this by watching Dorothy do it, every day, without exception. He also learned something more personal, something harder to systematize. He learned what it felt like to be in a room with someone who expected the best version of you and was willing to wait for it. Not with impatience, not with disappointment, but with the particular steady certainty of someone who has already decided what you're capable of and is simply giving you time to arrive there. Dorothy never told Marcus she believed in him, not in those words. She showed him the currency she actually controlled. Her time, her attention, her willingness to push back, her decision to bring him further into the operational thinking of the business year after year. When he told her at 24 that he was ready to make his first serious move, a small real estate partnership he had been structuring for 8 months, 3 investors, a modest initial project in an underserved neighborhood, she did not congratulate him immediately. She asked him to walk her through the risk structure. He did. All of it. Every contingency. Every downside scenario. Every decision point where the deal could go wrong. And what he would do when it did. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're ready?" 2 words, delivered with the same matter-of-fact certainty she applied to everything. No performance. No ceremony. Marcus felt him land somewhere very deep. "I'm not leaving," he said quickly. "I'll still be here. I can work the weekend events while the project gets started." "Marcus," Dorothy said. He stopped. "Go build your thing," she said. "That's what this was for." He looked at her across the prep counter, where they had sat through dozens of early morning conversations over 4 years. The notebook in his pocket was the 4th one. The first 3 were full. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Dorothy picked up her clipboard and looked back at the prep sheet. "Build something that lasts," she said. "That's how." He left at the end of that month. The first project succeeded modestly. The second more substantially. The third changed everything. By the time Marcus was 30, he had a company with its own floor in a building he had designed. By 34, he was being profiled in financial publications that used words like visionary and self-made and once in a generation. He read those words and thought about a woman who would have pushed back on every single one of them. He tried to find her twice in those years. The commercial kitchen space had been vacated. Dorothy had retired from catering business. He learned, and the number he had for her was no longer in service. He searched through the limited channels available to him and hit walls each time. He kept the notebooks. He read them on the hardest nights and the most important mornings. Her voice was in every page, precise and warm and utterly without flattery. He built $3 billion on the foundation of what she had given him in that kitchen. And not a day passed when he did not know it. The foundation he established at 34, quietly, without a press release, before anyone was watching, was called the Dorothy Fund internally among a small team, though its public name was something more formal. It funded first-generation entrepreneurs from under-resourced communities, not with advice or mentorship programs or inspirational programming, with capital, with structural support, with exactly the kind of practical, no flattery, high expectation engagement that Dorothy had given him, because he understood from the inside what that was worth. 412 recipients in 3 years. He knew each of their names. He found her on a Thursday afternoon in March, not through a corporate search, not through a private investigator, through a former client of Dorothy's catering business who had stayed in touch over the years and mentioned, without realizing what she was handing him, that Dorothy was living in a small apartment in Philadelphia, had been retired for 3 years, and spent most mornings now teaching business basics to young entrepreneurs at a community center 2 blocks from her building. Marcus sat with that for a long time. Then he got in a car, not a car service, not a driver, himself, and drove to Philadelphia. Dorothy opened the apartment door and looked at him for a long moment. He was 37 years old, charcoal suit, the same eyes she had first assessed across a prep counter at 4:30 in the morning 16 years ago. Focused, slightly guarded, carrying more than they showed. Marcus Cole, she said, not surprised, not performative, just his name, the way she had always said it, like it was something she had already confirmed the value of and was simply acknowledging. You're not easy to find, he said. I wasn't hiding, she said. Come in. The apartment was small and warm and entirely Dorothy uncluttered, a full bookshelf, something simmering on the stove, a stack of papers on a table that looked like curriculum materials for her community center sessions. Practical, purposeful, nothing unnecessary. She made tea. He sat at her kitchen table. A different kitchen, a different table. But the geometry of it was exactly the same, and something in his chest recognized at the moment he sat down. They talked for 4 hours. He told her everything. The first project, the failures inside the successes, the nights he had read the notebooks, the specific meeting. He could name the date, the room, the exact moment, where he had heard her voice asking the question she would have asked and made the decision that changed everything. The fund, the 412, the names he knew. Dorothy listened the way she always had, completely, without performing reaction. When he finished, she looked at him steadily across the table. You did that, she said. Not me. You gave me the foundation, he said. I showed up, she said. And I expected something real from you. You did the rest. Don't hand me what belongs to you. Marcus looked at her. I want to give you what belongs to you, he said. He told her about the Harrington Gala, the platform, the endowment announcement. He told her he had been planning what he wanted to say for 3 years and had known for 3 years who he wanted in the room when he said it. Dorothy looked at him for a long moment. Marcus, I'm not asking you to do anything, he said. Just be in the room. A silence. Dorothy looked down at her tea, then out the window, then back at him with the expression he recognized from the prep counter, the one that meant she had already made the decision and was simply completing the formality of arriving at out loud. You were always the most stubborn person in any kitchen I ever ran, she said. I learned from the best, he said. She came. She sat in the 3rd row in a simple navy dress, natural hair down, looking exactly like herself, not performing occasion, just present in the way she had always been present, completely. Without reservation, Marcus walked to the stage. 300 people applauded. Chandeliers caught the light. He stood at the podium and looked out at the room and found her face in the third row. Without searching for it, he began to speak. He talked about foundations, about the things built in commercial kitchens at 4:30 in the morning that never appear in any business profile or financial summary, about the particular kind of investment that has no line item, the decision one person makes to take another person's thinking seriously, to push back on it, to act on it, to hold a standard high enough that the person in front of you has no choice but to rise toward it. He talked about a woman who had asked him in a job interview if he could follow instructions the first time without needing them explained twice, and hired him anyway when he told her honestly that he was working on it. He talked about a notebook, about questions asked across a prep counter before the city was awake, about the specific morning she had sat down across from him and said, "Tell me," and meant it entirely. He talked about Dorothy Mensa. By the time he said her name, the room was completely still. He looked directly at her in the third row. "Everything I built," he said, "I built on what you gave me in that kitchen. And what you gave me was not a formula or a framework or strategy. It was something far more valuable than any of those things. You gave me your actual attention, your honest pushback, your refusal to accept less from me than you could see I was capable of. You showed up at 4:30 in the morning, and you expected something real. And because you expected it, I had no choice but to find it." He paused. "I see you," he said. "I have always seen you. And I want every person in this room to know your name." Dorothy sat very still in the third row, hands folded in her lap, eyes bright. She did not look away. The applause, when it came, was the kind that starts before anyone decides to start it. Marcus found her after in the quiet just outside the main hall, away from the noise of 300 people still processing something that had moved them. She handed him something when he reached her, a small folded piece of paper. He opened it. It said, "I always knew. I just wanted to make sure you did too." Marcus stood with the paper in his hand. Then Dorothy put her hand briefly on his arm and said, in the same tone she'd used across every prep counter, every early morning, every 4-page notebook conversation they had ever had, "Now go back in there. You have work to do." Marcus laughed, really laughed, the unguarded kind that belongs only to people who are completely safe in the presence of the person they are laughing with. He went back in. Dorothy watched him go, and in the quiet of that hallway, alone for a moment with the applause still carrying through the walls, she allowed herself the things she had never allowed in front of him. She let herself feel the full weight of what they had built together. It was enormous, and it was exactly what she had always known it would be. Some people build empires with capital and connections and carefully calculated risk. Marcus Cole built his with something that never appears on a balance sheet. The belief of one woman who showed up at 4:30 in the morning with a prep sheet and a standard and a decision that a lost 21-year-old with a worn notebook was worth every bit of what she had to give. That is the thing about the Dorothys of this world. They do not wait to be asked. They do not wait to be thanked. They do not measure their investment against the return. They simply show up. And the buildings that rise from that foundation, the literal ones and the ones no architect ever draws, are the ones that last. Because some foundations are not made of concrete. They are made of presence, of consistency, of questions asked across a prep counter before the city wakes up, of a standard held high enough that the person in front of you has no choice but to grow into it, of a name said on a stage in front of 300 people by a man who never once forgot where his foundation came from, or who poured it. Thank you for staying with Dorothy and Marcus all the way to the end. If someone in your life showed up for you the way Dorothy showed up for Marcus, drop their name in the comments right now. Just their name. That is enough. Let this be the place where the people who shaped us quietly finally get to be seen. Subscribe to Echotales if you believe the most powerful stories are the ones happening in kitchens and prep rooms far from any stage. And share this today with one person who needs to be reminded that showing up consistently, without an audience, without guaranteed return, is the most powerful thing any of us will ever do. See you in the next one.